I'm Sandy Longhorn, and I'm an instructor here of English at Pulaski Technical College, for those of you who don't know me. I'm also the director of the Big Rock Reading Series, and I'm happy to welcome you all here tonight, and I'd like to thank you for making time in your busy schedules to come out and hear some poetry. I know you're not going to be disappointed. We have a fabulous pair of poets tonight. Bonus points to my students who know what poetic element I just used. Wink, wink. And we also will have door prizes at the end of the evening. And yeah, it should be a good time all around. Before we get started, I would like to ask you all to take your cell phones out and put them on mute, or whatever you need to do to them to make sure they don't ring during the reading. I know, one time my mother called me in the middle of a reading, and I had not done so. The other thing is I'll ask you to not text while the poets are reading. I know you don't think it's obtrusive, but your screen actually gives off a little light, and that goes up on your face in the darkness, and it looks like Halloween. It can be a little bit scary and distracting. So if you would please just set aside the technology for now. Before we begin, I need to acknowledge the support that we receive from our administrators, the English department faculty, some of whom are going to be helping out tonight, and from our donors who are listed on the back of the program. When we began the series, we knew that it was important that we showed our appreciation to our writers with a small honorarium, and all of those funds are generated through donations only. So those people listed on the back of the program play a large part in what we do. Inside the program, there are two pieces of paper. One is green and one is pink. We all know that green means money. So the green form is if you're moved by tonight's event and you'd like to help us bring more authors to Pulaski Tech, you fill out that green form. I'm going to ask everyone to fill out the pink form because we use that data to collect or to apply for grants, and we're in the process of applying for a very large grant that would ensure the program is funded for the next 5 years. So your information on that pink form can help us plea for money from other organizations. We're going to hear from our poets, and after they're finished, we'll have a Q&A. So if anything comes up during the reading that you're really interested in and want to hear more about, just jot yourself a note, and Andy and Steve will be happy to talk with you more after they finish reading. First, I'm going to introduce Stephen D. Schroeder. And I forgot to ask you if it was Schroeder or Schrader.
You got it right.
Okay, Schroeder. Steve's second book, The Royal Nonesuch, recently won the Devil's Kitchen Reading Award from Southern Illinois University. His first book, Torched Verse Ends, visual aids. His first book is Torched Verse Ends, and we have both books available here tonight. Books will be for sale after the reading. Schroeder's poetry is available or forthcoming from Barrow Street, The Journal, and Crab Orchard Review. Poems have also appeared by invitation in public transportation, city parks, and business waiting rooms. He serves as co-curator for Observable Readings in St. Louis and works as a certified professional resume writer. Please help me welcome Steve.
Thank you so much, Sandy. I really appreciate the introduction and just being able to read here. I'm going to start out with a couple poems from my first book, and then read some new things, and then mostly be reading from the most recent book right here. All right, the first poem is called From the Margins. Words blur over the edge of my page, Morse code, possibly SOS. I can't read the books of Henry James for 2 minutes without sticking a fork in my leg. When the UPS man or opportunity knocks, I flee out a window. In photos, I hide outside the frame. My eyes are blue butterflies on a shimmering windshield, voice the buzz of a bug in one ear. Once there were women, Twice there was a woman. Thrice I sat on my hands. I sit in stands by my home phone. If someone called, I could tell them I'd take a message for my pseudonym. All right, and the next poem I'm going to read is one I actually don't read very often. I don't mostly write autobiographical poetry that is, a true story that really happened as it happened. There's elements of my life and everything, but it's almost never a true story. This, however, is almost exactly a true story of something that happened, and it's a family story, so it's strange to share it with people this way, but I like it. So it's called Cushion. If you like to play pool, you'll recognize a lot of the terminology here. Cushion. To win, my brother needed to bank and sink the 8-ball, a hateful trick of spin and divots, angle of incidence not equaling that of reflection off the cushion. Stare focused down the shaft, hair strung out on rail felt. He said, I forgot to tell you, Laura got an abortion. He'd also forgotten to tell me she was pregnant. I hit this, you get the next round. Backstroke unhindered by 2 empty pitchers. He rebounded his shot into the corner pocket's open mouth. So yeah, basically the only thing that changed there is the woman's name. I changed that to protect the innocent, relatively innocent. As Sandy mentioned in her intro, I write resumes for a living, and so my resume writing sort of comes up in my poems. I write a lot about employment, jobs, money making, that sort of thing. So this is one of those. It's called So You Want a Worker. You may only hire a worker if you promise to feed it and clean its messes. Please allow 2 to 4 weeks for delivery of your worker. Please allow your worker out of its metal crate twice a day for exercise. If you turn the heat up slowly, your worker will not attempt escape. You may only redeem your worker for store credit with a receipt. Your worker must be this tall to board the corporate jet. You may not carry your worker in your briefcase. Your worker will not attack itself in the mirror if you're watching. Do not bite your worker back. Wagers on your worker fighting are legal in international waters. Your worker is licensed for Florida and Indiana only. In India, your worker is a delicacy or sacred, maybe both. Your worker does not contain tasty candy bars for vending. The 10th time you use your worker, you earn a free drink. No, you may not buy another worker. You don't pay the one you have. Your worker will stare up at dropping stocks until it drowns. When your worker dies, bury it after you leave it in the freezer at least a year. Do not flush your worker. All right, and the couple new poems I'm going to read are from a project of sort of apocalyptic poems, interpreted in strange ways. So this one is like a little love poem, but it's apocalyptic. And it's untitled. I guess you could call it a margin note. Boy meets girl waiting in line to take a number to get on the list. Boy loses girl at the test site in a holding cell, all in your head. Boy finds girl if this statement is true-ish and a lie is where you are. Boy is phone trace and satellite photo and heat signature. Girl is twig askew or trail off cliff or birdsong still. I am investigators close the streets this close to you. Are you you? All right, and this one is an insomnia poem, which is something I deal with from time to time and write about a lot when I'm suffering from it. And the title of this one is, I'm actually not sure how to pronounce it exactly because it's just 3 Z's, like in the cartoons when someone's snoring you see the Z's. And so I don't know if I should pronounce it zzz or if I should actually snore when I say the title. But either way, imagine it snoring is the title because I don't really want to start snorting into this microphone. If sleep teased us, we inhaled busy pills. If it hazed us, we swallowed mosquitoes and held our tongues to the zapper. If it counted us as sheep, our count went from 3 bays of neighbor hounds to 8 stray gunshots to how many nanoseconds before sunrise? Who knew how many tweakers it took to unscrew a fluorescent bulb? The first answer was zzz, but 0 was better lest we caused the darkness. The best answer was not to answer. Sleep called us deadbeats. It called us after midnight and threatened to repossess our hours, or made no sound except to breathe blackout curtains in our ears. Nobody called the police fuzz because it felt like down pillows pressed down atop our airways. Though the sirens weren't that tight, those cops and their noise of choppers and coffee machines tempted us more than the daydream we never told anybody, so whoever guessed it must have spied. Some dreamers fought to get in bed with sleep. To get inside their heads, we needed to fix both eyelids wide and show flashcards for bullhorn and bulldozer. No doze could go on when we shook the babies awake with jackhammer earthquakes. Alarm clock buttons said snooze and chainsaws, but if we hit either, the readout froze on forget it. And this is the last of the apocalyptic ones I'll read. It's called The News. 50% of our marriages ended in stalemate, the rest in restaurants. We all tested above average as drivers, a phenomenon known online for its leap the median meme. A pie chart infographic showcased pie shortfalls with an empty piece bigger than 6 o'clock. On what remained of Main Street, the most popular building types were Brutal and Beirut. Behind our poor investments hid the Swiss, according to sources who slurred precision into a slur. More people trained as mountain men and women than as financiers and lawyers, whose numbers we had financed longer than the law allowed. The trend where workers threw themselves in front of a bullet train shocked the stock market. In a survey, area hospitals estimated railroad-related fatalities at 100 possibilities from none to untracked. The top tactic to cope with sorrow started with cans of chocolate frosting. 9 out of 10 dentists were identified by dental records. The 10th dentist was identified by investigators as a person of interest and an alleged pediatric practitioner. If we took the black medicine, nothing bad would happen. If we flipped the black switch to obey, something bad would happen to a stranger in a separate room. In mirrors, ambulance became danger. One cure for our hunger required a runaway dump truck. After the break, the Indians won and thunderstorms were coming. All right, and on the topic of both news and the storms we've been having, I don't actually know how bad the storms were here, but certainly I came from St. Louis, and everywhere in between here and St. Louis, they seem to be pretty bad in the last couple days. So this is a poem about both storms and the news. It's called One Frame Famous. Everything is falling up or sideways. Everybody breathless as a windstorm walls the water solid. Someone's body hits a river branch and breaks in half. Someone else's, fast as avalanches crystallizing, hits at least 100 miles per hour. Someone's fingertip hits buttons, and his voice replaces sirens with descriptions of them. Chyrons rattle death rate stats for boats in flames. Volcano, sea break, tidal wave, tornado, sea break, earthquake. Dry, unseen off screen, the anchor asks again, what country is this in? All right, and now I'm going to do another of my money-making employment type poems. This one's actually sort of a compulsive spending poem, I guess. And the poems in this book, all the titles are stolen from various other sources that I really like, and so the title of this poem is stolen from the TV show The Wire. I don't know if you like The Wire. If you like it, yay. If you don't like it, well, if you haven't seen it, you should watch it. So the title of the poem refers to money. It's called No Owners, Only Spenders. Cash makes you fun. A check can stop without your help and when it wants. Credit cards only hurt themselves. The way to Valhalla is open your wallet. For a gold mine, open a vein. Oh, platinum account, how else could 2 months' salary buy some more time? We should replace your girlfriends since our company is people too. If you would choose never to sleep with us, remember, please dream American. To save your country, pay until you're spent. And this poem comes from the fact that I used to work in retail, and I think retail work is generally awful. But at the same time, I love Target as a store. I don't know why it is, it's irrational, but I love Target. I used to go with my ex-girlfriend, we would go on dates to Target, which is a very cheap date, obviously. So the name of this poem is Everything Looks Like a Target. Kid, Black Friday nighthawks dart at the red eyes of logo, tag, and security guard. Slide electronics inside lampshade containers packed in the trash compactor, and fake a shark attack. Some guy wants a padlock, duct tape, duffel, shovel, and lie. Never mind why when line lengths double. Tell him to try aisle 9. We must undercut Costco casket sellers, and undercover surveys say the ways to reach these people are laser guidance or advertisements for raffles they've won. If shopping basket bombers write our soft lines off, scatter yourself as potpourri over rows of soap and candles infused with rose. And I should have actually mentioned beforehand, the Costco line is true. You can buy coffins at Costco if you're interested. I don't know why they sell them, but you probably get a really good deal on them. This poem I wrote not long after I bought a house for the first time, which is quite far in the past now, about 5 years ago. And I very much like it as a house, but it's definitely in a sketchy kind of neighborhood, which that kind of suits me. But the sketchiness of the neighborhood went into the poem. It's called A Place to Hang Your Head. Unfinished as the basement, nightfall drips from tight fittings and creeps in non-egress windows. No bars means no burglary yet. 2 doors require 3 keys, but 1 freezes in ghetto bird floodlight. Deadbolt your bedroom to keep out sleep and break-ins by kin who chatter at your attic squirrels. Yes, that's our pickup, idling outside. No, we will not help you move again. And no, you're not invited to our party and or fight. The last owner left through default and walls made of holes. That hallway leads to nobody. This poem is about 2 things I kind of always wish I was. And the first one is aspire secret agent, and the second one is good in social situations. It's called Nobody with a Good Car. Nobody with a good car arrives late for a party or turns down bootlegger reverses to elude the federales, inverts pergo for pergola, or burns the host of code phrases learned from the German gentleman. Answer, the covenants state that white is not an earth tone with butterfly knife is no kind of lifestyle. This is an escargot fork. Left tine goes in light sockets, right in a henchman's eyeball. Unseen, a ninja can punch through your rib cage and show you 99 ways to fill a cheese platter if you fail to explain or raise his latest credit score. For safety's sake, maybe we could take separate cars. You the Honda and I the Hyundai. All right, I'm going to make a kind of a tonal shift that I didn't realize I was making until I saw what poem was up next. So this is going to be a bit of a whiplash. This is, it's called Their Sons Grow Suicidally, which is stolen from a fantastic James Wright poem called Autumn Begins in Martins Ferry, Ohio. If you haven't read it, you should. Their sons grow suicidally, beautiful isn't spoken aloud. This Paxil lacks the overdose of those backseat lovers, cold and cloud. This nude bed's not yet said, screw yourself up to stick the point of the pen in psychiatry's eye. This dad adopts friend nicknames that amputate the end. This laboratory test job offers options of food or shock from the buzzer button. Eat that and shit and laminate paper tattooed with blueprints and batter your limbic system with bottles and sleep interrupted. They call it getting better. All right, and this one, the title is stolen from an E. E. Cummings poem, and it's actually one of the few poems I have by memory, so I'm going to recite the Cummings poem first, just to do that, and then we can go into my poem. So the Cummings poem goes, Buffalo Bill's defunct, who used to ride a water-smooth silver stallion and break 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pigeons just like that. Jesus, he was a handsome man. And what I want to know is, how do you like your blue-eyed boy, Mr. Death? And so this poem's called, How Do You Like Your Blue-Eyed Boy? If invisible Mr. Lift and his amazing Bernoulli birds nosedived my father's balsa glider on the driveway, where did he bury the survivors? Do I believe in Dad despite the evidence? When I told him I feared the darkened yard, how long before garden gnomes started appearing in my bedroom overnight? Sketching on plywood sheets in the garage, did he build my character a rogue? At the end of days, exhausted, soft-tossing fastballs at my chest, did he lie for hours, too tired to trade me for a coordinated kid? Was I a pain until he pried me from his forehead with my body fully grown? Why am I inside Dad's shadow if it's already dead? And I should know that at least half of that poem's total lies. My dad's still alive, and we get along pretty well. All right, this one, if I can find it, is title of this one is stolen from modern classic, The Princess Bride. It's called I Do Not Think It Means What You Think It Means. And if you hear words in here that it sounds like I'm misusing them, I am, it's intentional. And this is another one that's sort of weird things that happen when I try to write a love poem. It ends up like this. I do not think it means what you think it means. Can you find a thesaurus listing for us? Our synonyms for rumor are all but one untrue. Friends of friends forward the word they hear. Do you find my dishevelry tragic or attractive? I'm certainly the most invertebrate of flirts. Our relationship status is unattainable. Do I only do what I do with you? Add in bed after any of my statements, in bed. Repeat and repeat, sitting in a boat. If I compliment you, will you compliment me? When I'm with you, don't whisper implications. When I'm incognito, tell everyone I'm cute. When I'm gone, say I was beautiful. All right, and I'm going to close up with one more family poem. This one is another one with my brother who was featured in the autobiographical poem back at the beginning, and this is a direct address to him, and it's called Haunted by Waters. Oh brother, the other shore is farther than our father carried us across. The same current that hurries moss and swirls of leaves leaves your ankles broken down in rolling rocks. If you sink to your belly for a drink, the shallows swallow. If you try to stand and step, the deep hand reaches your throat like alcohol. Bite like the blade of a driftboat oar midstream and strain to change the river's course. Fight your end of the line, how steelhead steals rod and reel. Strike wet tinder with the pocket thunderstorm you keep buttoned up. I rain these drops of paper on the water, but they continue floating by you, brother. Thank you very much.
Thank Thank you so much, Steve. That was wonderful. And I hope you all realized that it's okay to laugh at poetry, or with poetry, not at it, but with it. But it was spectacular. And it's funny, Andy sort of leaned over and said, man, he's fabulous with the short form. And I hadn't even thought about it when I scheduled this reading, but we really do have two ends of an extreme here. Well, not too much, but you know. Anyway, Steve's poems are all these compressed, concise moments on the page, and what you're about to hear is a transition to someone who works in a little bit of a longer form, with poems that stretch out and sprawl out across the page. And I didn't even think about it when I paired you two together, but it's a fabulous result. So next we're going to hear from Andrew McFadyen-Ketchum. And Andy's first book, Ghost Gear, which is right here, was published in 2014 as a finalist for the Miller-Williams Prize at the University of Arkansas Press up in Fayetteville. His anthology, Apocalypse Now, Poems and Prose from the End of Days, was released in 2012, and he is series editor of the Floodgate Poetry Series, 3 chapbooks by 3 poets in a single volume. He is founder and editor of poemoftheweek.org, and if that's new to those of you in the audience, it's a fabulous site to check out. Poemoftheweek.org features 1 poet per week, and it will offer several of their poems along with interviews and biographies and other materials you can link to. It's just a fabulous resource for us to have. He's also a freelance editor, and he teaches college writing in Denver, Colorado. So please help me welcome Andy to the mic.
How's everybody doing? I left my cell phone up here and I was terrified the whole time. It was gonna, if it does that for mine, that'll be okay. Thanks for coming. There are a lot of you here. This is fantastic. On a Tuesday night after all these storms and with whatever havoc, raising the roof, all right? Whatever havoc has been going on out there with the traffic, it's really nice to have you. And I don't know if y'all here have read Sandy's books, but I just wanted to take a moment and recognize my first year in graduate school was in 2006. Let's not talk about it. And her book was on the reading list for my class, and it meant a lot to me. It's a really fabulous book. So if you haven't read her book, Blood Almanac is her first book. It's one that I think you should look at. And I also just want to thank the state of Arkansas, because without the state of Arkansas, my book wouldn't exist at all. So, yeah, you guys are going to represent Arkansas, the state, right now. So thank you for that, and thank you for having me here. Yeah, as Sandy said, I'm a bit of a lengthier poet. However, I'm going to throw in some short poems because I think I need to compete with you a little bit. We need to have a little back and forth here. This first poem I'm going to read is it's 3 pages long, but don't worry. It's a narrative poem. If you drift off, you can come back, and it'll work out okay. And I'm going to read 5 poems. And the way it's going to go is I'm going to have a narrative, a longer poem, and then a shorter lyric poem. And a longer narrative, shorter lyric, and a longer narrative. Okay. This first poem is called The Word Damn and the Word God. Who knows what strung those 2 words together on my tongue? The summer crisp moved in across the alley. All those long June hours, we tiptoed the rusted-out railroad, begging for the vibration of approaching freight, or playing Yahtzee, camped out in the dome tent pitched in his backyard, searching in the numbers for any sign of first light. But my money's on the afternoon, I stepped into a mining bee's hive, mid-stride catching a touchdown spiral with time running out, their home woven among the roots of Chris's peach tree. For weeks thereafter, St. Anne's across the street called, "Repent, repent!" I, the kid who stormed the neighborhood and escaped the bees, crying countless curses, every inch of my body scorched, a hymnal of goddams tucked between bicep and bird chest. Chris's father poured 2 gallons of gasoline on that construct of whispers, and my father let me watch him drop a lit match into the earth from our high kitchen window. That night, Chris gave me a mason jar of dead miners, curled up like wolf spiders swept out from under the couch, and all night I dreamt of the mason's magic, bees rising on invisible spindles in the grass in that pause between time and conflagration. But my mother decided it was Chris, who through the darkness of a few nights later, she heard screaming "goddams" with each strike of the father's leather across his son's back. I cried when my father told me I no longer could play with Chris, and he wept when I said, "But Chris is all I have." Chris, who caught a carp a day later, his prize strung up by an arm's-thick tree branch through its breathers. Chris, who liked to strum the testicles of his pit bull Rex, mean as hell, kept chained to a sycamore by the alley between our yards, but when Chris was around, turned into the sweetest of things. Chris, who I thought of this morning as fog lifted to reveal 3 acres of wheatgrass, frosted silver, reaching to the pole star like a bed of nails. And I was flung back to the day I stumbled from Chris's basement with a 2x4 rust-nailed to my heel, Chris unhooking Rex's chain, the panic bitter in my mouth, my eyes squeezed shut, then the warm slap of Rex's tongue from foot to nail, from nail to foot, Chris and I bearing witness to the healing power of a dog's saliva as he rubbed Rex's balls, and Rex groaned as blood eased from my skin. He and his father moved late that fall, chasing factories deep south, and now Chris lives in that place where everything seems true. Some say his father took to Evan Williams, some say Chris simply became what he already was. And I wish I could say I've run into him in the line at the DMV or at some bar I've come to for the dancing, and there's Chris, stitched into fishnets, neon strobes like moons in his vinyl knee-highs, eyes shadow thick as clay and tire tread. Wish I could say we've laughed over beers and told old stories, slapped one another on the back and argued over the tab. But Chris's father didn't bother to clean the boning knife sequined from yet another Sunday on Arkabutla Lake, 3 largemouth reserved on their bed of ice, Rex outside howling. And now I wonder if this explains that summer of goddams Chris yowled down all those dreary railroad miles, how he always knew at the splits which curves turned to the switchyard and which paved the path to Tennessee's Jerusalem. So glory be the goddams, he cried, all those hours it takes a knife to the gut to kill a man. Goddams to the hours it must have taken Chris to die. Goddams to the carp we never caught, to the knife destined for Chris's gut. Goddams to all dogs too weak to loose their chains. Goddams to all the stories we do not tell. To all fathers angry with their sons, goddamn. If I could, I'd take Chris in my arms. I'd get down with the grit and linoleum and patch that rift of skin with my tongue. I'd hold the boy drunk between 2 logs. I'd freeze ourselves and wait for the sculptor who pulls greatness out of stone. Our 2 bodies draped one into the other. The word damn and the word God. So the second poem I'm going to read is my Competing with Steve's short form poem. And I've never actually read this aloud, and it's sort of funny because Mark Jarman when I was visiting at Vanderbilt on Friday, actually singled this poem out and made some observations about it that, of course, I have never made. I don't know about you guys, but I think sometimes as poets and creative writers, we feel like we're supposed to be in control of everything, and I think at some point I realized that it needed to control me more than I it. And now that this book is out, it's really been quite an amazing experience to hear people's thoughts on it. And sometimes I think, well, that's just wacko. And sometimes I go, whoa, you know, and he made some observations about this that made me feel like it had grown for me, and that was a neat experience. So I want to share it with you. This is called Constellations. Outside, children snag fireflies in the fallow field. Return home, cupped hands, lighthouses aflight, countless brilliant lantern heads surrounded by bone. Later, caged in a mason jar set before the window, the bronze disc of its lid slipped open for air. A handful of fireflies lie folded beneath a single blade of grass. As night storms angles in through the curtains, their glass apocalyptic speckled with random bulbs of rain, each flickering street lamp multiplied and shimmering as the flies try again to ignite their pyres. Constellations descended, these echoes of fire. Also has that apocalyptic theme that seems to just it never ceases to pop back up. Okay, so I'm going to read another narrative poem. This is 1 page plus a little. 7-line stanzas. It's in these little blocks. Okay. I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee. I know I have very little of a Southern accent, and I've just spent the whole weekend with Nashvillians, and so the bit of an accent I do have is now emerged. This is from my best friend Peter Wyatt. Grew up together, and we used to have a little bit too much fun in Nashville, which I might have repeated this weekend. Yeah, this is dedicated to him. This is called Driving into the Cumberland. They know they aren't the first or the last, clanging along in their clam bake of 30 weight and red-lined RPMs, blood brothers weaving in and out of the US 100's metered yellow dashes. They're 16, making their way 15 miles west of town to that sheer drop of Tennessee limestone, where gas pedal weighed down with a cinder block and stick shifted into D. They watch that V6 peel out in a sidewinder of mud clods and black exhaust to somersault 80 feet to the Cheatham County Cumberland below. These are the days before death and finances will stop them back at the fork in the highway, the days when they still compare the putting on of a condom to suiting up for the moon, and are angry at their fathers for being their fathers. When they think back on it, they'll think it's all the unknowing of 16 years that drove them to that high promontory. The Continental's single headlamp coppering as it sank like a submersible, and the waters made murky by runoff. To watch it disappear around a bend in the river, and know for fact they've left their mark on the city of their births. To peer into the shallows of the riverfront, 8 blocks from their high school, and envision that Continental at rest in that mausoleum of Cutlass Sierras and totaled GTOs. Just what was it about that Continental that begged to fly? They'll ask all summer, rewriting the details of their story beyond even their own disbelief. Just watch how, electing to stay in the car, they toss back the last dregs of their fifth of tequila, yell, fuck it, and floor that once luxury 4-door, speeding for the cliff's edge. What song Billy Corgan churs through the radio will change hands in the telling innumerable times. What degree of fullness the moon they will be wise to misremember. Look at them, swimming by its baleful light back to shore. Look at them, lying and laughing together. Tonight, they are alive. Tonight, they are breathing.
Neither is thinking of the long walk home. Neither yet knows that weaving their way back to town through the moonlit dark, that stumbling stoned along the edge of the highway they just drove, Peter will keep saying, "Look, it's the world. We're finally seeing the world." Two-poem warning. So something that's kind of interesting, at least to me, about the book is that the poem I'm going to read here in a moment is the last poem I wrote for the book. It's the first poem in the book. And it's kind of like a film, you know. There's some point in our growing up when we learn that, no, they don't shoot films chronologically. They shoot them sort of however they gotta get their locations and such. And I think something that is important to think about with a book of poetry is it didn't start here and end here. You know, there's all this process and all this collaboration and all this hard work with teachers and friends and with the soul to make something actually work as a larger collection. So this is the first poem in the book, yet the last to be written. This is called Singing. What do I know of God, but that each winter I thank him for it? No spider web snagged in the blue stem, no horseflies at rest in blossoming cones of henbit, no slug trails pinned to the cooled hoods of cars. We are creatures all, stillborn to the language of split pine rails standing like pickets, eyes glazed to bone in every rut, the stealth tracks of jays, a sleepless ideography in the snow. But we are not entirely alone between the mountain ranges, and these hours condemned to darkness before the sun jars open the face of February and the red flare of Mars grows dim. Just outside my door, the bur oak is wintered full of grackles, hundreds of coin-eyed scuttles ornamenting its branches. Here, my breath plumes gray, and the distance brush catches fire. The wind, if you watch, is calligraphy. The stars in winter, a weightlessness. The grackles are doors, rasping their flight plans limb to limb. The grackles are doors, some limbed with light, others black. Rising, my arms have long been open. Stepping across these thresholds, I step across these thresholds. Singing, I sing. And the final poem I'm going to read, though I have a note to myself to remind myself to tell you, if you buy a book, you get a free gift. You have a choice of two buttons. You have a button with the cover of the book on it, which is actually a piece of art that I commissioned from an artist in Seattle. It's an original piece. I mean, not this one, but the one that was made for the book. Or you get a button with a badass unicorn on it. All right, yeah, everybody lights up when they see that. My cover artist sent this to me as a joke, and I said it's perfect. All right, and people say, well, what do unicorns have to do with the book? And I say, well, there are no unicorns in the book. And someone explained to me, well, that's the whole point of the unicorn is you can't actually see the unicorn. So I get apparently they're just everywhere. So yeah, you get a sort of funny gift. So this last poem is 3.5 pages long. It uses white space a lot. I just kind of want to show it to you. You can't see much, but it moves around on the page a lot for various reasons. And growing up, my father, he's a short little dude. He's like this tall, and my mom's this tall, so a little odd. And but he really had a pretty wild raising up. He was a military brat, moved all over the place, and he just has all these amazing stories that he told us as kids growing up. And this is the first poem I wrote for the book. And Judy Jordan, who was my great mentor at Southern Illinois University, Carbondale, will claim this is not true, but when I first got there, first class I took, I'm sitting at the end of the table, she's at the end of the table, we're kind of staring at each other down, I'm not sure why, because that was not a good idea to do. And she said, you have to work 100 hours on a poem before you can even bring it in, and I thought, well, I don't really know how to do that. Well, I did this, And the first couple of poems I brought in, she would wait in the workshop until the very end. She'd have it slid, my poem slid underneath all the others. I don't know why. So, well, I do know why. So that she could ream them. She would just destroy them. I mean, just brutal, right? And then towards the end, this is the first 3 or 4 poems I wrote for the class. Towards the end, she'd say, well, we need to say something nice about this poem. Nice font. Garamond. And when I turned in this poem, she wrote, send it to poetry, which is like the place, which I did, and of course they rejected it every single year. But what I stumbled upon was a way to write this book, and you'll see how it works in a second. But it's basically a story within a story within a story, and it's retellings of my father's stories. That's how the book works. It has an arc, a bit like a novel. And essentially, my father, his stories are of a rural survival. And I grew up in a very difficult, rough neighborhood in Nashville, Tennessee, which you've learned a little bit about in the last few minutes. And this book is about my own urban survival through his tales and making stories of my own. And that's how I got out of there. So this is my last poem. Again, thank you so much for being here. This is also the title poem. It's called Ghost Gear. Low tide, my father high steps the trammel net, stoops half submerged into Naga Bay, and begins the work of disentangling yet another sockeye from the interlaced snares. He stands before me now, the same foot shorter he's been the last 10 years. My sister and I, nothing back then but a notion, when my father could hold his breath, well over a minute, he says. How or why, I've learned not to ask. The familiar arc of his story cast out like he, the newest member of the crew, flung to the farthest edge of the inner title. I could hear better then, he always adds. Good thing, I always think. Otherwise, he'd not have heard that thin cry of alarm from the beach. Otherwise, he'd not have looked up from his work to see the bellowing chord of the continental shelf rise to obscure summer's first dusk, as if Britomardis herself, goddess of fishermen, has half risen from the sea to encompass that final island of the Aleutians. Dumbstruck, my father watches the waves suck in the tide like a maw. His legs, wranglers rolled to the knee, for the first time exposed. The net, an organism in and of itself, a bare root system. Salmon left clapping wet sand as far as the eye can see, a wave the width of his vision, charging the land. My father claims that in such moments, the body lightens. My father claims that there he saw himself bird's eye view, that he watched himself look up at the sky, and the sky had become a mirror. And he sees his body ascend the cumulus, as if pulled by threads of light, each thrust to the sky's wide wings lifting him ever closer to a rift in the clouds. But my father does not kneel genuflect to the gods. My father does not consider his sins or ask for forgiveness. Rather, he gives his marrow to those ropes. He weaves himself into those moorings. And the last thing he sees is the wave. And the last thing he hears is something like the clap of 1,000 hands. And the sea took him. Language fails my father here, so he resorts to sound. Wham! Slamming one open palm into the other as if to quash something living, his posture surging in our living room, the tumblings of his cliffhanger, body whipped by the imagined sea. How do I describe what seemed like hours beneath the waves? I am a poet retelling a telling. The sea did not care about my father, but the wave came and went, and my father held his ground, the backdraft strong in the waves' wake, Britomardis' final tug for his spirit, and he lashed the flesh of his life from that ocean, and the water receded. Now, my father lights up when he tells how he returned to the beach as slowly as possible. and how when the men finally saw him emerge from the sea, they cheered his name. My father returned from what they believed to be the dead. Ghost gear, they call it. Nets and riggings lost at sea to fish for no man. Blindly trolling seines illuminating the deep with their bioluminescent catch. Ruptured buoys and trammels coasting past coral reefs until they drift down, down, down into the dark. Only once have I asked my father why he chose out there to live. Only once has he told me that as the wave approached, he heard a voice. And that voice asked him, "Are you a father?" And my father said, "Yes." Thank you.
We have time for a few questions, so I'm going to ask Steve and Andy to share the mic here if they can, without fighting over it. And, does anybody have a question?
I'm a teacher, so I'll pick on you if I have to.
I've got a question.
Ask away.
So, let me make sure I get the name of it. Andrew, yes? Growing up, did you and your father have a lot of conflict between your father and yourself?
We still do that. Why do you ask that? Or what he asked was, growing up, did my dad and I have a lot of conflict? I'm curious, why did you ask that question? No one's ever asked me that. I'm just, where did that come from?
Well, one, you talked about where you grew up at and one of your poems was your best friend. So it's related to your environment. And the last one you talked about your father.
Yeah.
How your experience, his experiences somehow shaped your experiences.
Yeah.
And just curious, and I guess the metaphors you use.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. See what I mean? I'm like, oh, okay. Something new.
Did you both always know that you wanted to be a poet? Was this something that you always enjoyed, even when you were young?
All right, the question was, did we always know we wanted to be poets from when we were young? And for me, I've been good at writing a long time, and I've always enjoyed it, but I don't know that I always thought I was going to be a writer. For a long time, I thought I was going to be a computer game designer. I guess that would have involved some writing, but not in the same way. And I definitely didn't always know I was going to be a poet. I think somewhere inside, I still think I'm going to be a novelist, but that's it's not happening yet anyway. So I guess it's sort of a half and half answer for me. Writing was always something very dear to me, but it wasn't necessarily that I knew I was going to be a poet.
Yeah, I think I have a similar answer. The first thing I remember writing as a graphic novel when I was like 6 or 7. It's called Harry the Hobgoblin, and it was about Harry and he was misunderstood. Early Frankenstein sort of thing. But I wrote my first, and I was a fiction writer. I hated poetry, for a while, and then when I was 13 years old, I had my first job at this little produce market in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was the cleanup boy. Worked for $3.15 an hour, and I was sweeping, doing my thing, and they had taken me aside and said, "Andy, you gotta sweep under things. You can't just, I was learning how to be an employee, I never got any good at it, but so I was getting up under there, doing my thing, and this wobbly, this rotted piece of corn sort of wobbled out, and I looked down at it, and I'm not kidding. I thought to myself, what if I were this piece of corn? I proceeded to write a poem in which I was comparing myself to vegetables and fruits, but it just happened. The poem just happened. Like, I don't know, you know what I mean? It just, bam. All of a sudden, I was writing poems, and I've pretty much been a poet ever since, with some ups and downs. Yeah.
I was just wondering, because you said, a lot of these poems came from where you grew up. How has your writing changed since you moved to Colorado?
So she said a lot of my poems about growing up. How has it changed since I moved to Colorado? Is that about right? Well, I moved away from Nashville for college, and then worked in politics and was a chef and a landscaper and kind of moved all over the place. So I guess the answer would be, since I've left, I've just lived a lot of life. I applied to MFA programs right after college, didn't get in, best thing that could have happened for me. And really, to be honest with you, I mean, that's really when I started to really write really seriously, was when I was no longer in school and was just working. You know, what else was I going to do with myself? Work, party, write poems. So, sort of similar to what I'm doing right now. But I don't know that it's really changed. Since I finished this book and I've finished a second, I made myself change style and things like that, and now I'm writing new poems that are like political poems, which I hate political poetry, but I'm like, well, I guess I'll give it a shot. So if it's changed, it's because I've asked myself to change, just because I don't want to do the same thing over and over and over. You know, at least not with one book out. You've moved around a lot.
I live in St. Louis now, and I used to live in Colorado actually, and I always I write a few poems that are geographically informed by where I am, but I think a lot of the way I change, and my writing has changed a ton, and you could probably at least sort of tell the difference between the poems from the first book and the new stuff. And I think it's a lot like Andy said, where I want to keep getting better at it, and so I keep working at it, and I don't know that it's always better how I change, but I definitely keep changing, and to the point where I read something from the first book and I can recognize that it's good, but it seems like somebody else probably wrote it. It barely seems like I wrote it anymore.
Okay, I'll ask another question. It's killing me. Steve.
Yeah.
Right? So this is not to excite anything, but question, like you said, you're looking at St. Louis now, given the recent events going on there, you really believe about that? Run a few more specifically, kind of what you're talking about.
Sure, yeah. So the question is, have I written anything about recent events, presumably Ferguson and things like that in St. Louis? As opposed to Andy, I actually very much like socio-political poetry, and I write quite a lot of it, although I didn't read a whole lot of it tonight. But one thing I don't typically do is write in direct response to an event like that, because when I do that, I think it ends up being a kind of shallow writing, like this thing happened and now here's my take on it. And if you want to write an editorial or something like that, then that's a great way to go. But in a poem, for my poems anyway, some people write very well that way, but for my poems, I tend to wait quite a while before that sort of thing starts seeping into my poetry. And while I haven't addressed Ferguson or anything like that directly, a lot of the poems in the new manuscript I'm working on actually come from having been in St. Louis for 7 years now, and having observed the fascinating racial and class interactions and dynamics that are going on there, which is something that, coming from Colorado, I didn't see close to as much. And so that's definitely coming into the work, but not in a direct way though.
I'm actually glad you asked that, because I'm planning on going to Ferguson in about 10 days. I don't know if anything specific, I don't know if there's a specific march that will be going on. I'm sort of figuring all that out, but that's what I've been doing lately. That's what I found myself bending toward, what's going on there, well, in the whole country, obviously, but what's particularly exploded there, and then what's going on in the Middle East. That's where the political stuff is coming in, but yeah.
Okay, we have time for one more question, if there's one out there.
I'm gonna ask for, I want to talk to Steve.
Okay.
I know that you talk about your brother
Uh-huh.
in two of the poems. Did he influence you any with this writing?
Could you speak a little louder? I'm sorry.
Your brother, Chris,
Yes.
I noticed you talked about him
Yeah.
twice in the cover of the poem. Was he a good mentor or influence for you?
Well, he's actually a younger brother.
Okay.
The question is about if my brother influenced my writing, but I do. He's definitely influenced my life a great deal. I think if you look at it in an overall sense, he's the most important person in my life. Yeah, as you could tell from the poems I mentioned him in, he's a very troubled individual in a lot of ways. And I've spent a lot of my life preparing. He's 5 years younger than I am. I've spent a lot of my life preparing myself for, I'm probably going to have to bury him at some point before I should have to. He's actually doing better now, so I'm kind of, I don't want to let my guard down though. And so that's, yeah, but yeah, he continues to be a major influence in my life.
Yeah. All right. One more.
Oh, one.
Sure.
One more. Go
I
ahead.
have a question just based on what you said. It seems like writing helps you to be a little more, it's not really a question, I guess it's a statement, a little more open with who you are and your emotions. Because like from first off, it seems like just based off you kind of, I think you had a poem about being comfortable in social settings, but yet you seem comfortable with expressing how you feel. Does it help to, the more you write, does it help to make you more open, I guess?
Okay, that's a good question. So the question is, does writing help me be more comfortable with expressing myself, talking about myself? And yeah, it definitely does. And I think partially I'm actually fairly comfortable here because I'm used to this sort of reading setting. If you saw me at a party, I would be a lot more awkward. I'd be just standing against the wall and you would have to come talk to me. It would be really bad. But in this situation, I'm more comfortable. But a lot of it is the writing that I know I do that well, and I know I can put myself out there, and people sort of expect that from poems. And so, yeah, I think it does work out.
I would agree. Yeah, it's like we know we're not totally terrible at it, so all right.
You guys want to stand?
As we wrap up, could you please fill out your pink survey? And Miss Evans is going to be at the door up here, and she'll be picking up your pink surveys as you come out. While you're doing that, check those pieces of paper. Do you have a gold sheet of paper in your program? Does that gold sheet of paper say congratulations? Yay! If you have a gold sheet of paper, you have won a free book. This is not a free book from one of our authors, but we have a library, it's not even a library, it's a bookstore over here. And to get a book, you need a golden ticket, and you can pick any book you'd like and take it with you tonight and enjoy it. It's yours to keep for coming out tonight. We have another event in November that's listed in the program. If you enjoyed tonight, I hope to see you then. And finally, let's just give Andy and Steve another great round of applause for the